So I'll go ahead and get us kicked off. Again, we only have an hour together. Good morning. My name is Amy Julian. I am the director for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And we have put together, every time this group comes together, this is part of the LEAD workshops that we put together for OET staff. And LEAD is Leadership Excellence, Action, and Development. And again, these were developed as a response to the work that you have been asked to do and a response to the professional development that you requested. So we're excited to put this series together to really meet your needs. I wanted to kind of go over real quickly this morning, the upcoming webinars. February 19th, we'll have Synergy. Do you have it? Some small group dynamic tips and tricks there. March 19th, we're going to talk about project management and taking initiative and being accountable. And then April 16th, we're going to talk about managing your schedule like a boss, the art of delegating and saying no, which I know is difficult. That's one of my challenges often, but I will be talking about that. May 21st, we're going to be talking about listen to understand and solution creations, tips for active listening and problem solving. And then on June 18th, we will be talking about be your best professional self, improving professional relationships. In addition, I wanted to go over the fact that we do have this great newsletter that goes out. If you're not getting this, let me know, because I got the list from Diane and I was assured that it's everybody on OET. So if you're new or haven't got this or got this from someone else, let us know. A couple things I want to point out with this list is that any training, any recording, previous trainings are available on the OET website, and that's available to you at any time. So if, let's say Mark's talking to Laura and they missed last month, they can go back and they can watch it again because those are all recorded for you. And then these come out bi-weekly. And in addition to that, at the bottom of that email is information that is tips and tricks. So tools, tips, proactive advice. Really, ICSPS is looking at the research out there, and we're giving you some access to some great toolkits. So please take a minute and look at those when those come through your email box. With that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Jennifer Phillips, and she is going to talk today about presentations that resonate with your audience. The last thing I do want to say, and it was mentioned in the email, if there's a topic that you're really anxious to hear about, if there's a topic that you say, oh my gosh, I need professional development on this, let us know, because we're really designing this series and other series to meet your needs. So we will be running an equity series as well to really get OET up to speed on equity. So with that, Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome everybody. I hope everyone's having a good Friday morning and looking forward to a nice 3-day weekend with Martin Luther King on Monday. So today's presentation is focused on creating and delivering presentations. My colleague, Kirsten Baer, who's on the line with us today, presented in December on public speaking, and many of the themes that she presented on will be reinforced and will probably resonate with you today. It's kind of two sides of the coin. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Phillips. I'm the Strategic Initiatives Coordinator at ICSPS. Prior to that, I did consulting for 10 years and did quite a bit of strategic communication coaching for various nonprofit and philanthropic clients. So today is going to be an extremely fast-paced presentation. I'm going to be covering material that's usually covered in multiple hour or day-long trainings. We could talk about some of these topics for days. I'm going to be sharing information from sessions that I've either taken or coaching sessions that I've done for former clients. I'm going to be giving you shortcuts and cheat codes today, basically pointing you in the right direction. And there's a price for attending this morning. That price is that you have homework to do afterwards. After this session, you'll have a lot of tools and resources at your disposal, but they really will only be as good as the time that you commit on your own calendars to learn more or get better at what you already know. We've got some poll questions coming up to ask you about whether you'd like to go a little deeper on various topics. So without further ado, I'm going to get going. I'm going to start slightly backwards. Normally, I would save the resource slides for the end of the presentation and maybe not even present on them at all. But I want to highlight the 3 principal sources that I'm going to be drawing heavily from today, just so you have them in the top of your mind as we get going. So the first one, and I should also mention that all three of these resources are completely free. There are excellent websites and downloads for you to use. So the first is something from the Goodman Center that is a report that is called Why Bad Presentations Happen to Good Causes. I cannot sing the praises of Andy Goodman enough. I think I used some of his material in the presentation I did in November on meetings, but this is a completely free resource that can be downloaded. The second is Dan and Chip Heath have a series of books. One of them is called Made to Stick. This little success model can be used in just about any setting, but it's great for like thinking about whether your presentation meets the test of these 6 principles. And so I'll be drawing heavily from the Heath brothers as we go along today too. And again, they have a terrific downloadable resource about presentations made to stick that's on their website. The third principal resource is Duarte Communications. Some of you may have already heard of Nancy Duarte and her communications firm, but I'll be drawing heavily on some of her work. This particular book on the screen is not free, so I made this, this slide as a cheat code. It's essentially all the components that are in this book in tiny little font. It's probably hard to read, but if you print this, it's kind of a handy cheat code resource. But her website has a number of free resources. So the Duarte Resource Hub is, the link is here. And I should have said in the beginning, all of these slides are available on our website for you to download. This is just kind of a handy presentation checklist, but trust me, there are a number of other resources that are available for free, and I'm going to be using some of them in the presentation today. So let's get into this. The presentation is broken into 3 topic areas for us today. The first is PowerPoint basics and tips. The second is best practices for actually creating your slide deck. And the third is best practices for presenting those slides. Since this is a small group, please feel free to ask questions, use the chat to ask questions, or just unmute yourself and ask. And there are no wrong questions as we get into this. So I'm going to start, Kirsten, if you wouldn't mind starting with the poll questions. So the first question is, would you be interested in a professional development session just on using PowerPoint? And the second poll question is, how would you rate your PowerPoint user skills? This is going to give me, as your presenter, a little bit of background on my audience before I start giving some of these slides. I need to go backwards a slide. All right. Let's see, we're at 50% of voting. Give it another minute. And Kirsten, I forget, can the audience see the results right now on the screen?
They cannot, but they will be able to when I share the results in 1 second.
Perfect. Awesome. So we have some shy people out there because only 5 of 10 of you have voted. All right, Kirsten, you're sharing, right?
I am. Yes, I went ahead and
Okay.
entered the poll and then shared the results.
So it looks like of the 5 of you that voted, there's 100% that are interested in some, maybe a deeper session on just using PowerPoint. And I probably should have said using PowerPoint or Google Slides. I think people are using both a lot in parallel. And then the second is, how would you rate your PowerPoint user skills? It looks like we have, of the 5 people that voted, some intermediate users, like they know, you know your way around enough, and a few people that are advanced beginners. So that's super helpful. I'm going to stop sharing, or Kirsten, can you stop sharing the results and I'll go back into the presentation. Awesome. Thank you. So this first section is going to be at a super high level. So hopefully you won't be frustrated with me by how fast we're going to go through. But I'm going to show you what's possible and point you in the right directions to learn more. And then I think what we might do is think about whether there's a way to have a deeper dive presentation based on at least those initial survey results. So what's on the screen right now is every one of these next coming slides will have a link at the bottom, and this is where that homework part comes in. Microsoft itself really does have a terrific set of tutorials on using PowerPoint. This one is, PowerPoint basics. The tips that I wanted to point out today are 9. They're using templates, how to use the design idea function. Oh, my slides are going forward without me. Using smart art, how to zoom, how to use animations, how to use the slide sorter, especially if you're building, practicing with timings, how to do the recording capacity, and how to do, there's a reuse slide function that I'll talk about in just a second. So this is literally like tip of the iceberg kind of stuff, but just to very quickly go through some of these things. So some of you may already know that there is a template function in PowerPoint, but if you don't, it's usually when you start a new presentation, you can look through various templates. And for one of the templates that I have saved for presenting, whether that's with Julio or Patrick or someone else, is that OET kind of blue and orange template that some of you may already have saved. But there are countless templates here to test out. The second kind of relatively newish function in PowerPoint is the design ideas. You'll find it up here in your toolbar. Usually it comes on this right side of the column and gives you different choices. When you're using smart art, text, or photos, it really can help those slides pop. Oh, and Mark Burgess is saying we should remind that for presentations by WIOA WorkNet partners, there is a template. Yes, absolutely. And you know what, I think I have a slide that has that template, but we can make sure that people have that PowerPoint template going forward. So you may be only using that WIOA WorkNet template or something else. So Smart Art is in the insert part of the toolbar. Again, all of these have links to the tutorials. Smart Art gives you this ability, and you're going to see it a ton in my presentation. You actually just saw it in that 9 color block. It gives a way to do kind of visualize the data and the information that you're presenting. So Zoom slide. So Zoom, again, great tutorial. I'm going to just show you what I mean by like Zoom slide. So say I want to put the the magnifying glass here, right? It gives you this ability to zoom in and out on different parts of your presentation, right? So it's a really handy tool for presenting. Just wanted to give you a quick show, and I'll show you some more about that in a little bit. Animations, you could have a whole presentation on animations. If you don't know how to use them, again, Microsoft has some fantastic resources. If we did do a deeper dive on Microsoft PowerPoint or Google Slides, we'd probably go into some of these tutorials in depth. The slide sorter. So slide sorter is something that is really handy if you've got a long presentation or if you're merging presentations from multiple people. It gives you, I'm actually going to go out of presentation mode right now and pull over. I'm going to do some, you'll see I'm going to do a couple live demoing things today. So for the slide sorter, it's in the view part of your toolbar. It gives you this ability to swap and reorder your slides in a really helpful, kind of handy way to do that. So I'm going to go back into the presentation here. Practicing recording and timing. When you have a super tight deadline, you've got 30 minutes with Julio or with the director, Sometimes it's really helpful to time yourself. Again, I'm going to go into the live demo mode here. It's in the slideshow. You can rehearse your timings and you can actually record yourself. So just a case in point, Kim Kuchenbrod, who is working on talent pipeline management for OET, has been recording herself doing trainings on the TPM, talent pipeline management model, and then posting them online. So these two little tricks are super helpful to know how to use. And again, there's more tutorial from Microsoft at the bottom. The reuse slide function. This is really important when, as a manager, say you have a presentation that you're giving to an outside audience or an internal DCEO audience, and you have slides from 3 different colleagues. In the toolbar under home, there's a reuse slide function. It basically lets you make sure that the format is all consistent when you're merging multiple decks of slides together. It's a handy tool if you haven't heard of it. I'm going to just pause and check the chat here. Okay. So that is the end of that section. And now I'm going to move into the building your presentation part of this morning. So I'm going to go over 6 elements for crafting better presentations. Those 6 elements are, what's your presentation's big idea, knowing your audience, the presentation type that you select, how to avoid slide overload, using visuals and visual vocabulary, and how to use data for impact. Sorry, I'm going to pause, make sure. Sorry, Patrick, I'm just reading from the chat. I didn't understand the reuse slide. Just to pause for a second, I'll actually go back. Just want to make sure that I'm paying attention to you guys and your questions. So the reuse slide, so say you have a presentation that you are responsible for managing, but 2 or 3 of your colleagues or people that you supervise have actually sent you slides, but that slide deck has to look and feel like it's from one entity, one person, like you're the person delivering. Instead of having to literally cut and paste and have to deal with some of the template issues, the reuse slide function makes it very easy to essentially seamlessly merge people's presentations together. So we use it a lot at the center, like for WIOA Wednesdays when you've got a slide deck and you've got 3 presenters on one call. But I'm not going to spend too much more time on that in the interest of time, but please, if you're curious about this one, the tutorial is fantastic. And certainly I would imagine that any one of us could help with potential follow-up if you wanted to know more. All right, so just doing a quick time check. What is your presentation's big idea, right? So the components of a big idea are articulating your unique point of view and kind of conveying what's at stake. So one tip that is from Duarte Communications that I ascribe to and I think is a really good way to approach building a presentation is really thinking about how to organize before you start making slides. Like, what is your strategic outline? I typically use paper or Post-it notes before I start doing that. Again, you can use that slide sorter that I showed you just a minute ago to kind of check your flow. Like, a presentation has to have sort of a beginning, a middle, and an end. And doing, really thinking about that frame before you start making the slides can be really helpful. And the main point here is to slow down as you build and make sure your thoughts are well organized and there's that flow to your presentation. All right, I'm just checking the chat again. All right. So Kirsten touched on this a lot during her presentation on public speaking in December, but there's really no substitute for knowing your audience. It's essential to presentations. Andy Goodman has some fantastic resources in that report that I showed you earlier about how to take your audience from point A to point B, right? Who's going to be in that audience? What do they know or believe that I can build on? Is this about convincing that audience? And in the end, what do I want them to have learned? How do you want your audience to feel? And if there's a call to action, what do you want them to do? So during a presentation, this is a great quote from Ken Hamer, who's the AT&T presentation research manager. Designing a presentation without an audience in mind is like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern, right? It's really critical to understand your audience's power as you prepare for your presentation. What's on the screen right now is a really simple free resource that's a great checklist of questions to get to know your audience, very similar to the questions I just shared from the Andy Goodman report. And I'd just like to point out that these, both the Duarte and the Andy Goodman reports have really great checklists that I'm not going to go into today for time's sake. So it's not what you say, it's what they hear. Frank Luntz is a conservative pollster and focus group guru. And Nancy Duarte often says, like, the audience doesn't need to tune themselves into you. You need to tune your message to them, and really understanding their hearts and minds will help you make a connection with your audience. Kirsten also quoted Frank Luntz in her presentation on public speaking and used this great quote about stuffing yourself in your listener's shoes. It's a really terrific, easy thing to keep in mind as you build your presentations. So what kind of presentation will you give? I've been thinking about this element quite a bit during the pandemic as we've migrated to this virtual work environment. I've been using slides during very simple meetings as a visual guide or a pathway for agendas and moving conversations forward. As you build your presentation, it's really essential to ask yourself, what kind of presentation are you giving? It's really the flip side of the knowing your audience coin. And just a case in point, right? This is a teaching type presentation. Some questions to think about, like, are you presenting internally to colleagues to inform them? Are you presenting to the DCEO director, the governor's office, legislators to persuade them? Are you presenting to inspire? Are you presenting for something that you want to ask from your audience? These are all the questions that are really worth asking yourselves as you begin that part of building your presentation. So this slide has a hyperlink to 8 different presentation styles. These are all short videos with famous people you probably know. It's, again, part of that homework assignment that I mentioned in the beginning, that if you want to go deeper, those videos are worth watching. So this is just an example of the kind of slides that I've been using in virtual meetings, helping guide a group online. Sometimes it's really helpful to have that kind of visual to kind of check off where you are in a Zoom meeting. And then finally, this is not on that list of 8 presentation types, but I wanted to share it. This audience may not use pacheca-cha very often, but pacheca-cha is Japanese for chit chat. It's the fastest growing storytelling presentation style there is right now. And it has a very simple rule. It's 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide. And it's really about sort of short storytelling conversations. There are full day sessions on pacheca-cha that you could take, but I just wanted to share it as a presentation style. Okay, and Patrick is saying, love this, and so does Julio. So that's, I think maybe we'll ask some survey questions after on whether you want to go deeper on some of those things. So what is like the number one thing when people are asked what goes wrong with a presentation? Like, the universal answer is like, slides are incomprehensible. Like, I cannot follow what's happening here, right? Number one, too much information on a slide. The data is too dense. There's too many words on the slide, too many ideas on one slide, cheesy clip art. And I have to admit, like I'm very guilty in my presentations of using cartoons. But you know, try and think about like how to use those kind of things judiciously. And then like slides that are cluttered and disorganized. I'm going to go into just a little bit more here on too much information on a slide and what you can do. So I adore this quote from Seth Godin about, he has a book called Really Bad PowerPoint, that communication is about getting others to adopt your point of view to help them understand why you're excited, sad, optimistic, or whatever else you are. If all you want to do is create a file of facts and figures, then cancel the meeting and send it in a report. So I'm going to go into two different ways to break down the challenge of slide overload. So number one, Nancy Duarte has a whole philosophy called slide docs. And I am finding myself more and more trying to be in that slide doc mentality. What a slide doc is it's not what you present, it's what you leave behind afterwards. So it's essentially, you know, if you think about like, I just have to get those 9 points across, but I don't want to do it with a slide that looks messy or incomprehensible, then you think about leaving, you create a slide doc and it's a leave behind. So there's a whole presentation on slide docs. She has, you can download the slide docs PDF on her website, and there are some free little webinars on how to use them. So today, again, I'm pointing you to these excellent free resources, but we're not going to have time to go into them today. All right, so if you want to share a lot of information, think about using a slide doc as a leave behind. But let's get into like how to think about avoiding slide overload in your actual slides. So this is kind of a no-brainer that, you know, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. That's Da Vinci. My favorite mnemonic device is a Nancy Duarte, give your slides space. So some of these slides are recaptured directly from a Duarte webinar that is free to take. And so they may be a little blurry on your screen. So focus on my messages and not on the actual slides as we go through them. So what does it mean to give your slides space? So SPACE is an acronym about simplifying, planning for what's on your slide, arranging and thinking about it as a designer, being consistent about font and style and bolding and things like that. And then where do you want to have your viewers' eyes go? Like thinking about what you're emphasizing. This is another great mnemonic device from my colleague, Kirsten. It's funny and super memorable because it's crap. But essentially you're focused on creating contrast in your slides, creating repetition in your slides, creating alignment in your slides, and having proximity. So things that are kind of grouped and related in ways that are intuitive. So these slides in full are available at the end of the slide deck that you can download, but it's another great mnemonic. All right, so again, this slide too blurry to read, but you get the point. This is an example of a slide, way too much information on it. So how can you break this down, right? You can see in the blurriness here that there are 5 kind of green headers, and you can move it to paring it down to the most important messages to show, and then tell the rest in your auditory presentation, right? So thinking about and this is also a great example of using smart art. So these circles that you see are a smart art tool. So you can literally just cut and paste your 5 headlines and put them into a smart art format. Again, the top slide, way too much information on it, right? So this is kind of guilty of having two pieces of information on one slide. And again, there's no crime in breaking this into more slides, right? Like this could be a slide doc up on top as a leave behind, but when you're presenting, you really want to break the top part of that slide into one slide and the bottom part here. I'm going to also just do another demo of how to use the Zoom, the magnifying glass function, right? So you can, on a slide like this, you can take the magnifying glass and click on, oops, sorry. I just got ahead of myself, sorry. Using the magnifying glass, which I'm going to show you in just a second, it's a really easy way to zoom in and out of a slide. So this is just a reminder to use space, the space mnemonic, and practice design, not decoration, to really display information that makes complex information more clear. So this slide is literally just a screenshot of how I was using presentation mode in PowerPoint to use the magnifying glass. So what you can't see right now is, you're seeing my slides, and on my other screen, I have it in presenter mode so that I can see the slides and the next slide coming up. And this is exactly what it looks like, right? And this little handy dandy tool is your magnifying glass where you can zoom in and out of slides. So I can even zoom in and out based on where I want to be doing it like that. So just another little kind of fun PowerPoint tip. All right, we've got another chat comment here from Mark Burgess. I think overload of information on a slide is one, if not the biggest error I see in presentations. And then reading the slide rather than presenting the information. Mark, I can't agree with you more. It's why I've tried to kind of spend a bunch of time on how to avoid slide overload. And then when we get into presenting your presentations, I've got some other kind of tips for making sure that your audience is actually listening to you and not reading or trying to like, what does this slide mean? I don't get this. Instead of really focusing on the message. So the fifth element of building a good presentation is using visuals, right? So why use visuals in your presentations? Well, obscurity is really the enemy of persuasion. So if you have an obscure message and too many words on a slide, you're not going to be able to persuade in the same powerful way. That facts alone, like so putting a bunch of bullet point facts on a PowerPoint really might also fall short. And you really need to have sort of stories and images in people's heads to make that connection. I've got another chat here. Patrick Campbell is writing that it always comes across as though the presenter doesn't really understand fully the content when they read it. So he's basically just agreeing like, and reading slides is also not the best practice as well. So Mark, I think you'll appreciate this. Like your audience is either going to read your slides or listen to you. They're not going to do both. So you really need to ask yourself, is it more important that they listen or more effective if they read? Now, I think it's really important to say, especially to this audience, right, that you're working with policymakers, you're working with state government officials all the time, that sometimes you actually do need to have something on a slide that they might read. Or you might, you really need to know your audience and know your presentation type to know whether it's more effective to use like that pachacacha, like one picture kind of thing and just be talking, or whether you do need to have some data and information up on your slide. So the takeaway here is really thinking about using metaphors as glue, right? That you can communicate your ideas with strong visual grammar to engage their senses and kind of like help them adopt the ideas as their own, and use those metaphors, those pictures as ways to tell your story or to make a point in a very memorable way. So again, leaning heavily on Nancy Duarte here, but this is a free resource on her website. It's essentially a checklist. You can have this on your desk or, in a file folder to test whether your slides are ready for prime time, right? Does it pass this glance test? Does it have one message or too many? Is it audience relevant? What kind of visual elements does it have? Is there an emphasis on data or a non-emphasis? If it uses a diagram, like make sure it's actually clear how things are arranged on a slide and whether you're using animation. And this question of, is the animation a distraction or is it a proactive, intentional thing? It's a fantastic tool. So the last thing on building presentations is using data to make a point or tell a story. Given the nature of the work that all of you do, using data to make a point is critical. You probably do it every single day in your jobs, whether you're presenting or not. And the ability to do that in a way that connects with your audience is really essential. So this is like, I'm guilty of using, it's not a cartoon, but kind of a cheesy thing of, 4 out of 3 people struggle with math. Data is an important tool, no question, but data is not the message. Conveying the meaning of the data and its conclusions creates the messages. It's a really important distinction. I so wish we had time. I'm just doing a time. No, I so wish we had time to watch these videos together. And maybe if we do have a minute or two, we can come back at the end. The column 5 video, the blue video, is less than 2 minutes. The Dan Heath video on the mighty statistic and how to make numbers stick is less than 4 minutes. So if you watch these afterwards for 6 minutes, you will have some really powerful insights for how to convey your data visually and in a presentation to convey meaning next time you present. But I'm sorry, but we can't go through them. Okay, so those were the 6 things, elements about building a presentation. Now I'm going to move into the last section, the actual presenting part. So Kirsten covered so many great tips and practices in December. And if you missed that session, it is on demand on our website. Highly encourage you to take a look at it, either watch the video or download the slides or do both. But never deliver a presentation that you wouldn't want to sit through, right? Like that's Nancy Duarte's golden rule. It's common sense. You're probably all shaking your head. Yes, 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 yes. But we do it all the time. So the things that I want to emphasize for delivering a presentation, prepare. So this is a hilarious quote from President Woodrow Wilson, who said, if I'm going to speak for 10 minutes, I need a week for preparation. If I speak for 15 minutes, I only need 3 days. If I have to speak for half an hour, I only need 2 days. And if I'm going to speak for an hour, I'm ready right now, right? So it's like we trick ourselves all the time into thinking that we're prepared. So, but it's really in the crafting and the recrafting, the iteration and rehearsal. And that's where like excellence in presentation really emerges. And sometimes we just need to tell ourselves that sometimes that's just not possible, right? You get a call from Julio or some other manager or a demand from the governor's office, and you got like an hour to put something together, right? So let's just be real, like sometimes it's not possible, but it's a really good thing to keep in mind and depending on your presentation type and your audience. So this is, these are just some statistics that Andy Goodman had put out, how much time on average do people spend preparing? Not a lot, right? I'm not going to read all of these figures, but not a lot of people have formal training in presenting, and not a lot of people spend a lot of time rehearsing and sort of on the preparation mode. So it does matter. You can't always do it, but it does matter. So the next thing about presenting is really the effect of enthusiasm. So keep that camera on if you can. Kirsten covered a number of tips about presence, about your tone, about your cadence, body language, things like that. You can have an amazing presentation developed, but it can fall flat if you can't present it well and you can't connect with your audience. I just love this quote that, good communication is as stimulating as black coffee and just as hard to sleep after, right? So you really want, your job is to have at the end of a presentation, have people be like, wow, that was really motivating, or wow, I'm going to act on this. So I'm going to pause because I think I see another chat in here. Any suggestions, experiential insight on how to make required or dry info a little bit more exciting? Government sometimes, many times, requires that we present on this, and it's just not exciting. That is, and that's from Patrick Campbell. Patrick, that is a fantastic question and a topic. I think this next section might answer some of those questions. And if they don't, use the chat again and we can come back to it. So one of my favorite coaching questions to ask clients is, will your audience be able to remember and repeat something from your presentation to another person, whether that's a personal connection or a work connection? Can they remember and repeat something that day, the next day, and the week after, right? So we're going to go over some techniques to grab your audience's attention. And to Patrick's point, I'm going to try and speak to how to make boring or, sort of dry information kind of come to life. Oops. The next one. So I'm going to go over two kind of handy little tips. These are like in your cheat code packet. So grabbing your audience's attention. So finding ways to make the presentation or the piece of information personal, kind of the storytelling piece, throwing out a quirky fact, putting them on the edge of their seats, drawing out a hypothetical scenario, creating a series of vignettes through your presentation, or using a pertinent quote. So I'm trying to think of something kind of dry that I've had to present on in the OET world. So let's see, some of you may know that I've been helping create a NOFO for the Illinois Works Act for their pre-apprenticeship. And some of the pieces can be really boring and dry, but we actually use the hypothetical scenarios. We kind of created some scenarios and some slides of the potential pre-apprentice person. So I think there's some ways, you can get kind of clever or creative with making more dry information kind of come to life. This second attention grabbing technique is from Nancy Duarte. She's got a couple different great webinars on this, but it's so easy to remember. Create a star moment, right? Something they'll always remember. And the star has 5 points, and each point is a different technique, right? So a memorable dramatization, a shocking statistic, an evocative visual, repeatable sound bites, and emotive storytelling. This all helps answer that question, like, will somebody from your audience be able to tell another person today, tomorrow, or a week from now, something that they learned from this presentation? And I hope you remember the star moment. I hope that you can take, take this little mnemonic away and share it with somebody else. All right, I think we've got another chat question. Patrick, is it appropriate to test an audience at the end of a presentation to see if in fact they can repeat what you have presented? So one thing that I am not going to have time to cover it all today is how to use poll questions, but I'm going to get into the fact that that's a way to interact with your audience in just a second. Okay, so the last thing that I want to highlight on presenting, on delivering a presentation, is how to interact, right? So these are 6 different ideas. They're by no means exhaustive in terms of interaction techniques to use in a presentation. So one, to answer your question, Patrick, one way to kind of test your audience's knowledge is not saving questions for the end and not ending on a question. You can actually ask your audience some questions, either peppered throughout or, in different ways. You can also, I have solicit feedback in advance, but you can also solicit feedback afterwards. You can kind of have a check for understanding, check in One of the techniques that we use at the center for the WeOA Wednesday webinars is that, and actually this series as well, we always send a SurveyMonkey survey out, right? You can always check in with your audience after the fact. Using poll questions. So you saw today, I started because I kind of wanted to get a sense of, how you guys thought about yourselves in terms of PowerPoint usage. So using poll questions, and we could actually do a session on how to build poll questions into presentations if that's of interest. Building in time for engagement, right? So I've been trying to, throughout this presentation, especially since it's a small group, check that chat, pause, ask for questions. You can also engage your audience by brainstorming with them beforehand and promising to follow up on unanswered questions. So again, by no means is this an exhaustive list of interaction ideas, but it's some good ones to think about. Okay, so it's 9:46 and I'm gonna recap, and then we can have some discussion, or I can go back and show you some of the information like in the video format. But the things to take away today, right? So aside from the PowerPoint tips, how to build your presentation. What are those 6 elements? Your presentation's big idea, knowing your audience, the presentation type that you use, avoiding slide overload, using visuals and visual vocabulary, that metaphor piece that I was talking about, and using data for impact. And then for delivering, we could spend a whole day on how to deliver great presentations, but I just picked 4 kind of big picture things about preparing, showing that enthusiasm, grabbing attention, and interacting with your audience. All right, and Amy's saying to show the 2-minute video. So that is the end of the presentation. When you download the slides, you'll see that there's some other articles that I have, some other like kind of handy cheat sheets and 1-pagers and things like that. But that is, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna check. I don't think I have anything in the chat, but if people felt like unmuting themselves and engaging, I'm happy to go back and go deeper for the next 13 minutes or so, if people want to do that. So I'm going to, I've already got this all preloaded. So Amy, somebody on the call is gonna have to tell me whether the video, or I'm sorry, the sound works on this.
They say knowledge is power.
It does, but it's just really quiet, Jen. So just turn it up a little bit.
Yep. Make it bigger.
Maybe turn your computer volume up.
Yep, working on it. Okay, it's at 100. I'm at my top.
How do we make knowledge powerful? Especially when that knowledge comes in the form of data.
Is it too quiet?
Lots of data.
No, I can hear it good.
Meaning. Tell the story. Share the story. Infographics, where data meets design. What makes good data visualization? Take a few seconds to count the 7s in the number set. How many were there? Not sure? Now try. A simple color change makes comprehension almost instant. Color is one of several pre-attentive attributes, like size, orientation, flicker. Visual clues that the human brain processes within 250 milliseconds. Now imagine that we're not looking for specific numbers, but patterns. We can use color to show correlation, size to show quantity, or orientation to show trends. And not just data. The power of design can be used to better communicate all sorts of information. Processes, hierarchy, anatomy, chronology. Better communication through innovation. Because your message is only as good as your ability to share it.
All right. So now you have two minutes less homework. to do. Kirsten, would you be willing to read what you just put in the chat in answer to Patrick's question? Because I think it's a really excellent point. I think people on the call who were on Kirsten's presentation know that she actually teaches on this subject.
Yeah, so in my experience, when I'm presenting in the past or when I'm teaching, I think it's effective to kind of do a checkpoint for your audience's retainment of that information. I think if you word the questions correctly, um, potentially you could do it, and it depends on your audience. Like if it's your team, your direct team, I think it would be effective to do kind of a post check right afterwards. But if you're presenting to an audience, like for example, the way we do it with the OET team on these trainings is we send out that post survey after the presentation, and it is technically anonymous. So we're still getting that feedback and knowing that our audience is retaining or not retaining that information, or if they have questions, but it gives them the opportunity to do so after the fact and anonymously. I think if you do so in an audience setting like this, or if you're presenting to a wider audience, or maybe like your whole department or something like that, it can be misconstrued. Your intention could be misconstrued. And that also has to do a lot with how you word your post check questions. So just being aware of that, I think is important. So yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to get at.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Kirsten. So it's 9:52. I could show the other video if people want to stick around and do that. I wish I could have an instant poll right now. Maybe if you use the chat, if I could get a sense of who can stick around, I can show the mighty statistic. While we're waiting for that, I want to show one other resource. So I had mentioned that the bad presentations, why bad presentations happen to good causes, is completely free. You can download it. I do want to show you the appendix of this report has these amazing checklists to go. Sorry, driving too fast. So starting at page 75 of this document, and frankly, if you don't want to print the whole report, you can pick certain sections to print, but anything after page 75, you've got the questions for audience research, sort of the logistics, and like this is a lot, this is, pre-pandemic of thinking about room setup and lighting and sound and things like that. This little diagram about the structure for an effective presentation. That's kind of this is a sample getting from point A to point B, and this is a 1 hour, reliable techniques for opening, some questions to sharpen your storytelling, techniques for making PowerPoint more effective, and some evaluation forms, right? So these are, if you want to kind of check in to find out, the reflections of your audience, these are here. So just wanted to do a quick showing of that. All right, I am gonna go. I have enough people that are saying yes to so this little video is Dan Heath, made to stick. In my mind, it's exactly the story of like, how do you make something that's kind of boring or dry come to life?
I want to tell you about a statistic that changed my life, and afterwards give you some thoughts about how to make your own data a little more life-changing. The stat that moved me came from a colleague of mine here at Fast Company, Charles Fishman. He wrote a piece about the bottled water industry. And let me give you a little bit of backstory here. The city of San Francisco gets its municipal water supply from Yosemite, and it is so clean, the EPA doesn't even require the city to filter it. It's also dirt cheap. Per ounce, the water costs about 0.0021 cents. Compare that with bottled water, which is more like 7.9 cents per ounce. So clearly bottled water is more expensive, but you knew that. The question is, how much more expensive? Well, consider the thought experiment that Fishman posed. Let's say you buy a bottle of Evian water in San Francisco. It costs $1.35. And after you drink it, you decide to reuse the bottle. And you fill it up once per day with tap water. So question, how many days could you refill that bottle of water before you owe the city of San Francisco $1.35 in water charges? Take a guess. The answer is you could refill that bottle for 10 years, 5 months, and 21 days before you'd owe San Francisco $1.35. Now, when I heard that statistic, my brain exploded. And it has done a lot to change my behavior. I've probably cut my bottled water purchases by 90% since then. I just can't live with the cognitive dissonance. Now, here's what's interesting about this. Fishman hasn't added any new information here. He's still working from those same 2 statistics that we started with. But what's adding drama and depth here is that he's put those statistics in a real life context. And that's the fundamental mission of making data stick, is to drag the numbers within the range of our intuition. I'll give you a business example. Years ago, Cisco Systems was contemplating whether to launch a wireless network for its employees. Now, obviously, that's kind of a duh decision today, but it wasn't at the time. And they had computed that launching this wireless network would cost about $500 per year per employee to maintain. So is this a good idea? Is it not a good idea? It's hard to say. We don't have a lot of natural intuition about $500 expenses. But one of the employees at Cisco managed to activate intuition. They figured out that if each employee on average could save about a minute or 2 of time every day, that their network would be a good investment. Well, now all of a sudden, this is a problem that we can think about. Can we imagine a situation where an employee might save a couple of minutes because they had a wireless network? Well, almost certainly yes. Versus if the math had come out requiring 52 minutes of average daily savings, that probably would have been a hard sell. So bottom line, to make data stick, you've got to take responsibility for dragging those numbers into the range where your audience's intuition works. If you want to learn more about making statistics stick.
All right. I have a real life example that that I can share on sort of making numbers stick, and that I think will resonate with those of you that are still on the call. The difference between the numbers of people served in the WIOA system versus the number of Illinois residents who are served in the TANF or SNAP, right? The orders of magnitude are in the thousands of people different. So if you just put if you put a slide up that says who's being served in Illinois through TANF, through SNAP, through WIOA, you're going to see, this essentially a tiny number for WIOA. And if you put that slide up for state legislators, they're going to say, well, what's wrong with WIOA? Why can't they serve as many people? Well, the story and what you have to kind of figure out how to tell a legislator is the difference between an income support, a program that's essentially giving an income supplement to someone, and that's the delivery, versus training, right? Training that's not a one-time thing, it's an overtime kind of thing, and there's different rules and it's a fundamental difference in service between TANF and SNAP and WIOA. But if you just threw the numbers on a screen, it could be really misconstrued. Anyway, that's just a quick real-time example. I'm not seeing any other chat questions. And it's just 9:59. Thank you guys for coming today and investing an hour in this. I really hope you'll invest a couple, a little bit more time at your discretion looking at some of these resources, and we will make sure I think we'll specialize the survey questions that we follow up with next week to really get a better sense of whether you'd like to do some deeper dives on any of these topics. So thanks again for your attention today, and have a great weekend.